we probably need to do it. Oh, you got it. Okay.
Yep, it's like tonight.
All right, thank you, Tom.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having us. My name is Tom Nordstrom, and I'm with Emerson Health System Ambulance. And as you all know, we were commissioned to do a study.
We probably need to do it. Oh, got it.
With me is my colleague Kelly Haynes.
I'm gonna tell these guys to mute. Whoever's on the line, you can mute while Tom is continuing.
Ryan needs to mute the site on his browser. So it's not us, it's Ryan's browser.
Yeah,
It's always exciting to be
No, of
able to
course.
be muted.
With us tonight, she's a clinical manager. Well, so thank you for having us. I know the documents were emailed out. I'm not sure if you all had.
It's always
Is the ambulance manager with Emerson Health. How do you? A couple of, or more than a couple, just a few acronyms here, I think we may cover in the discussion, and you probably all know, but I'm using the abbreviation WAS for Waukesha Ambulance Service. Paid on call to mean many of you refer to volunteers, or paid on calls are referred to as volunteers. And that's what we're going to call it for this evening, but essentially volunteers, that we know them. Emergency medical services, emergency medical technician, and emergency medical responder. Again, this is a very much abbreviated presentation of 80+ page document that went into a lot of detail, and that detail, much of it is revolved around financials, billing processes, a lot of detail there, and I won't get into much of that tonight. But Brian and Caroline have been briefed on this as well. A lot of regulation for ambulance services in Minnesota and certainly throughout the nation. The EMSRB is the Emergency Medical Services Regulatory Board in Minnesota, and they essentially provide the licensing and the regulation around ambulance services in the state. In addition to the EMSRB, there are other federal and state agencies. A few assumptions. And we'll get into the key findings. And I think the best way to go through the presentations, please feel free to stop me if you have questions. So there'll be time at the end as well as our board. If there's something, feel free to ask away. One thing we want to commend City of Waukesha and the staff of Waukesha Ambulance is the amount of commitment, both from the full-time staff and the paid on call staff. So the chart you're seeing here is a reflection of actual paid on call or volunteers, the number of hours in 2021 that they took call. So this is again just the paid on call or the volunteers, and that line, that horizontal line in the middle is the average on call time of the year when we average all the results. So you can see there's a pretty large difference or standard deviation between the high end and the low end, and that's okay. People sign up for voluntary ambulance services for a variety of reasons. Some have more time to commit, some have less. All in all, though, that's about 11,000 hours of ambulance coverage. And currently there are 16 paid on call in the state. So This chart looks at, what would happen if there were only 10 paid on call staff, or what would happen if there were 24. And the column on the right, the annual leave column, is if all hours of on-call that needed to be covered were spread equally amongst the staff. That is the number of hours that each staff member would essentially take in a year. So right now, as of 2021 and into 2022, fluctuating right around 16 paid on call volunteer staff. If they all took the exact same number of on-call hours, it'd be about 705 hours a year. One of our recommendations is to increase the number of paid on call, ideally up to 24. And that doesn't mean that the 470 number of 24, that's exactly what they would take, but it would even out where people can have time off if they so desire and a couple more hours. So certainly consider recruitment into the high schools, and Ryan's working on that. So just some general staffing level recommendations, and again, there's a lot more detailed explanation in the analysis that we have tonight. We're going to again recommend moving from 16 to 24. It's recruitment. Strongly consider moving the EMR pay from $4 an hour to $6 an hour. Currently, the EMRs are at 4, the EMTs are at $6 an hour. So that's where their time is to be available. Continue to prioritize EMT and EMR recruitment, of course. And just some general strategies along the lines of the recruitment thing. And I think an annual report to the city council, more of a formalized report with staffing, financial would be very helpful. Any questions on the staffing level? Okay. This is these maps are illustrations of the difference between when there's a full-time or a person in the station, in the annual station. Let's say take two people to make a crew, and they respond to a medical call. So when they are in the station, essentially that graph on the left or the map on the left is the drive time, the distance that we go in 4 minutes for a response. The one on the right is when that crew is responding from home. Consider there's an additional 3 minutes and 4 minutes to get to the station before they even respond. So it's important just to be aware that making sure that the staff, when they are at the station, are ready to go. Typically, during the day, they should be out the door in less than a minute. Not quite the same with the paid on call or the volunteer, of course. They need to obey the driving rules and be safe getting to the station. More of just a observation. Some data cleanup, and I think Ryan is working on this already to the reporting site for the state, and that is where we pulled most of the data for the operational side of this analysis. What goes into that report needs to be cleaned up, and we want to make sure that the 911 emergencies are reported differently from other calls such as transfers. We want to set an expectation for full-time staff, those who are based at the station, to go and route to calls immediately and preferably less than 60 seconds. So that's the time from when the pager goes off until they're actually in the ambulance and moving out the door. We want to ensure that staff, full-time staff at the station on duty, that they have an ambulance with them. So if one of them needs to go to the store or whatever that is, or pick up lunch, they should both be in that ambulance when that happens, so they can respond where they are. Again, be with the ambulance and ready to respond. And another consideration is work with Wabasha County to consider moving to a EMD or emergency medical dispatch protocol. And what EMD does is when someone calls 911, it will provide that call with instructions, CPR, bleeding control, even up to help with the for that matter. And that's something to consider. Wabasha County currently works with mail, I believe, in doing CPR instructions. What we're understanding.
Is it CPR only?
CPR, because that's what was mainly.
Okay.
It can use them for other things too. That's open and stuff like that. And contracting for that. It's not, there's no pay for that service. It is so.
Okay.
And Gunderson offers it as well.
Is that live or automated?
What's that?
Is it live or automated?
It's live.
Is it live or automated?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, because mail utilizes EMDs and their dispatch center in Rochester.
What's LMS response?
I'm sorry, yeah, lights and sirens. So, yeah, I should have had that. Getting a bit into the financials, there's a common misconception out there about healthcare, specifically ambulance services, that when we bill out a dollar, we get a dollar of revenue coming in. That's just not the case. Generally, we mix up or break up our cater structure. So person, the entity responsible for the ambulance bill for general buckets, Medicare, Medicaid, commercial insurance, and then private pay. The private pay would be those folks without any insurance typically. And you can see on the graph here that we're showing that for every dollar billed out for Medicare, Wabasha expects to receive about 31 cents. Medicaid in Minnesota pays pretty much in parity with Medicare, so that same amount. Commercial insurance, you'll usually see a bit higher return. That can be anywhere from 58 cents, that can be even 90 cents. And the reason that's not 100% commercial is there are deductibles that sometimes so. There's been often discussion on rate increases and how rate increases if Wabasha wanted to increase their base rate or their mileage for that matter, how that would impact the actual revenue. So this chart is illustrating essentially on the right side, if Wabasha enacted a 20% rate increase, they would see about $5,000 a year in actual revenue. So once you get over the Medicare and Medicaid allowables, Medicare and Medicaid won't pay any more about that amount. So then this is when you have commercial insurances. We're not making a recommendation at this time to increase rates any further. And I think the rates that are currently in place as of January 1st are adequate. So some recommendations again outlined very well in the document. Clean up over accounts receivable. Their receivables. There was a move from the previous billing company to the current billing company. And often is the case in those situations, there was some money left out there that probably is not collectible anymore. However, it looks like the new billing company is doing a fine job. Rates are higher and collections. WAS was not in collection in an agreement with the collection agency, but since we started the assessment, that has happened. Brian,
Yep, and the first group of, or the first batch of went to collections on January 20th. 58 total accounts for $57,732.20.
that would turn.
Yeah,
So we may see 10 to 15%. Another recommendation is in Minnesota, revenue recapture is going to be utilized by ambulance services and certain municipalities, and that's just essentially putting on the tax for the residents' tax refund that we made. And when we make this recommendation, we also make a recommendation that there are charity care policies in place. So you do have people that are truly in poverty and really can't afford their bill. You can have some forgiveness up to say 200% of the poverty. So we wouldn't use the revenue recapture until we exhaust those responsibilities. But it is not uncommon for people to be really paid this much. Just establish monthly quarterly meetings, monthly or quarterly meetings with the billing company. And I think Brian, you're doing that now.
it's not a hard set. I do talk to the billing company frequently. And then I know Tyler gets a report every month. So, but there's not a like set meeting that quarterly or monthly that we do, but it's something we can put into place.
When we talk about revenue often, many of us are there's been a lot of kind of misconceptions about transfers themselves. You know, there's certainly a financial benefit to college that people are taken into the hospital or bring their loved ones in and just can't have it. So there is the ability to actually expand that for this. When you look at the revenue or the profitability, this is an average. There are many different ways to go about structuring but on average, we're looking at about 400 and that's using an average of either Ross or Rochester, which are the two main locations. overall, there's a potential, with a few caveats to increase revenue for the city. Anywhere reasonably from 20,000 all the way to 80,000, potentially 100,000, which just depends how, I guess how consistent the transfers are accepted and performed. I don't think that high end is really attainable in the next couple of years. But one of the recommendations we are, and I guess coming up later in the presentation, well, is that they're strongly considered a part-time ALS, or part-time paramedic status. What that'll do is two things. It'll help on the 911 side. For example, Brian's paramedic, and if other paramedics come in and decide to be paid on call or even full time for that matter, there's additional treatment, medications, procedures that paramedics perform in that situation. In addition, they're able to take additional more transfers than they are now. So about 20 to 25% of transfers coming out of St. Louis, the basic level. If there were a paramedic available, that would bring up numbers of transfers going on. And also there's a slight bit of higher reimbursements for transfers in the $50 to $75 range. At least for Medicare and Medicaid. And I think I did most of these, but again, I think the city should strongly consider plumbing transfers. One of the caveats is your volunteer.
Can you unmute yourself, and I'm gonna mute myself? Yeah.
Okay, how does that? Maybe not. Okay, does that work okay?
That is a lot better. It, for some reason, it didn't.
They should be able to hear me at least. So again, one of the caveats with the transfers is with the use of paid on-call staff. I think you have to be very careful on and use a lot of discretion on which transfers you accept and decline. So if you have paid on-call staff that say, hey, I'm signing up, I just want to cover 911, but I don't want to be gone 3 hours on a transfer, I think that needs to be taken into consideration. And I would strongly encourage Ryan to collaborate with crews and come up with some different incentives, potentially even financial incentives, to make that work. Understanding again that there is potential to lose volunteers if they are forced on long distance transfers, especially in the middle of the night if they work a regular job. But the transfers are so important that I think there's a lot of work needs to occur around figuring out a way to at least take more than you are now. The cost to upgrade to part-time advanced life support or part-time paramedic is fairly low in the scheme of things, less than $10,000. And I don't have it here, but
So what I found is just shy of $4,000. I've had conversations with both the hospital and with city about potentially cost sharing some medication, because there's medication that you can only buy in bulk, like 25, it's kind of 25 things that you need but wouldn't necessarily be able to go through before they expire. Both have been very open to sharing some of that cost with us and helping kind of streamline that process. And also, in my initial cost was pretty much all of the medications that I've been accustomed to in talking with the director in Caledonia. He's the only paramedic on their service, and they don't carry narcotics as a part of a big to try to cut down on some of the paperwork and cost. And so he said for an initial startup, that could be a way to go about cutting some costs in the upstart and streamlining the process a little bit by waiting on giving narcotics. So
I'm just wondering if there's any other questions on the part-time paramedic, because I do agree with Ryan. I think it's very affordable and would be a good move for the city. Okay. CMS, aka Medicare, is in the really the 4th year, but there were some delays with the pandemic of what they call a cost data collection program. So going forward, starting this year, every dollars spent on ambulance services and related to ambulance services needs to be collected and eventually reported next year back to Medicare. So that's just an awareness. And I think, Ryan, you were going to take some webinars, and you're registered for the account. So I think you're in fine shape there. Supplemental medical assistance payments, Wabasha is already participating in. I would just suggest continuing there. And again, the revenue recapture is very important. Revenue shortfall. So what we did was put an analysis on about a 3-year average, 2020 through 2022, and look at the shortfalls that the city of Wabasha has as far as offsetting the deficits in the ambulance service. And they are significant. I don't think this is any surprise. On average, on the next page here. On average, it was around $180,000 a year for that 3-year average of deficit that the city is making up for. Small town USA ambulance service, it would be incredibly difficult to find a way to even get close to break even. It's just a service, and it has to be looked at as a service that's provided to the residents and the visitors, of course. Similar to the fire department, the police department. I guess the good news is there is some reimbursement, there is some revenue stream, but it's just not enough in this setting to cover costs. So one of the recommendations we are going to make is to strongly consider spreading that per capita subsidy. Well, you don't have a per capita, to create a per capita subsidy and spread that deficit out evenly amongst the other townships and areas and cities that you cover. And this is just one chart based on that average. There are many different ways of looking at this, of course, and the numbers can be turned in any such way. But we were recommending, just based on that 3-year average, excluding capital cost, $35.72 per capita, and spread out equitable amongst those communities and their population.
Do we have statutory authority in the state of Minnesota to impose these per capita? Where is that? Because it is, we don't have to go at townships. We just make a bill up, give them a bill, and say, hey, this is what it is.
I don't think there's a special tax.
Two options.
And
Yes.
the special taxing district still be voluntary.
The voluntary as well.
Yeah,
And we share the authority with those other. townships.
With the special tax.
Yeah, with the board, maybe her.
It is the common practice throughout the state on communities this size and even much bigger. It is.
So it all has taxing authorities. I mean,
No, but they would have decision-making authority of that. Early on in this, Brandon, maybe people educated on this early, we'd rather retain the authority of our service, figure out what needs to happen, and then make that case in challenges versus develop a whole governance. Early on. And you're gonna say it's common practice?
It is, yeah, it is common practice. The amounts vary, of course, based on run volume, based on revenue coming in, based on the expense of the ambulance service, but very common. And they are, these townships and the city are realizing a very valuable service for no charge, and hopefully that can be communicated to them in such a way where they understand it. Another recommendation related to the business is, especially if you go down the per capita route or the subsidy route, look at restructuring how the ambulance accounting is practiced, make it into a business type activity. So revenue and expenses are attributable just to that business unit and not spread amongst other areas. It'll help with the future accounting, and it'll also help when you're providing reports to other townships and so on. I did not add in capital expenditures, but I would consider those, ambulance lifespan, whether you do a 5-year or 10-year depreciation, that should be part of that cost, because it definitely is a cost of running an ambulance service. The ambulance commission, and again, we did discuss this at the ambulance commission presentation, is from the mid-1980s. We do have a few recommendations. And depending on where you go with the subsidies or with other townships participating, that may change some of your thoughts as well. But the membership you may want to look at evaluating. It's looked at as an authoritative commission at this point. And when there are ambulance service members in voting positions, and the director is unofficially reporting to that entity, whether it was intended to or not, it's a little tricky. It's been working okay in some respect, but it does make for some conflicts between the director and the ambulance commission. And I have a lot of writing on this slide. I'll just let you kind of absorb it for a minute, but I'll hit the highlights. I mentioned the first one. We're worried about the disempowering of the director's authority or ability to run the service. And if you hire a position, hire a person into a director spot, they should have the authority within their limits, within their job scope to do just that. And having another entity essentially also operating and also running the ambulance service gets confusing. There are 2 medical professionals on the commission, just a consideration. And I'm not sure if that's necessary, especially if the director is a non-voting member or a participant in the scope.
I mean, is the most general sense reading. What makes a good planning commission member? Role conflicts that you healthcare providers involved in the system that we help serve. You know, does that tend to be a good match, or does that present an unintentional? I know, you want to know their thoughts, but their representation commission, is that where they best do that work with us?
The experience we've had with commissions, you want representation from the various, especially larger stakeholders. The hospital would be one of those, so certainly they'll have a healthcare person. The medical director currently is a non-voting liaison to this, so obviously very much medical, but community members, if you do go the per capita subsidy route, possibly a representative from 2 or 3 of those communities would be, I think, would help in the long run greatly, especially when it comes time to renegotiating or increasing per capitas down the road. Again, it's not a regulatory or authoritative commission, but more of a reporting entity, suggestions, more like a board of directory advisory board. Right? And I'm not sure, obviously in the 1980s, not sure what the intent was at that time, but the documents are in the printed material as well. Any other questions on the ambulance commission piece? I'm not giving a concrete recommendation here. I'm just saying it's something to strongly consider. It's been many, many years since it's been evaluated. Okay. Kelly will take over.
Okay, so Walt and I met with individual staff to kind of get like the human aspect of the internal workings of the ambulance as well, see what's going well, what needs some improvements and where the opportunities could be. So through those conversations, we were able to create a little synopsis of a SWOT. So some of the strengths the members had mentioned is the equipment is reliable. The training and education is great. They have flexible schedules. They enjoy being able to pick up whenever they kind of want to, which is very nice. And then they feel they have a lot of support from the community. Some weaknesses, staff accountability, holding those people to the required minimum hours of, I believe it's 36 hours if I'm correct, right? Yes. So holding them accountable, which will then hopefully alleviate some burnout and stress on those who are picking up numerous hours, so it can equal that out. BLS transfer declines is also a weakness. The lack of staff unification, and then that director turnover is a weakness as well. Some opportunities staff felt were maybe doing weekend staff to having full-time staff on weekends to kind of help alleviate some of that volunteer pickup so they can have that work-life balance. Community engagement, that recruitment piece, doing a little bit more PR events, engaging the community, showing them what you guys do, what it means to be an EMT or a paramedic if you go that route. Having open houses, et cetera, were some of the ideas. You guys have a hospital in town. Creating that partnership with that hospital is going to be your best asset. You can do training with them, a lot of collaboration pieces. So that would be another great opportunity. an opportunity to improve the culture, and we'll get a little bit more to that when we get to the threats. And then adding a Wisconsin licensure to do mutual aid for those across the river. Because as the rural services, the volunteers kind of are not volunteering anymore, we're going to need to help our partners. And you guys have, I believe it's Nelson and Pepin that are super close. So being able to help them out a little bit once they're called out and mutual aiding for their neighbors too. And then the ALS potential is another opportunity. Some of those threats through conversations, it's not really an inclusive culture. There's not a lot of growth for the newer members. There's a lot more pushback and not growing and engaging those newer staff, which lead them to the retention piece to lower a little bit. Lack of funding from the townships, but that has been covered and getting looked into. And then the leadership structure, allowing the director to make the decisions and just report to the commission. And then also allowing some empowerment to the director from the council here as well, allowing that support and trust in the director to support the ambulance system. A lot of our results did resemble a lot of what the MSRB assessment did too, so it mirrored it very, very closely. Do you guys have any questions related to any of this?
This is probably a question. So mutual aid is just now goes on license or.
Yeah, currently we have a mutual. Western Buffalo County, which is a since the inception of the Western Buffalo County one, we haven't been called to help them. I know in the past they covered the Dyke Road and we have helped them prior to becoming, but we have been covering Pepin. And I know there's services beyond those two that are also trying to pull it Pepin in Western Buffalo County. So there's, you know, EMS as a whole, especially in the smaller communities, is really starting to get stressed, and with the lower volunteers, everybody's kind of pulling in everybody, and so it's not a perfect system, and there's some limitations to the mutual aid agreement. I've talked with the Wisconsin EMS state agency, and he had given me some clarity, and then I think maybe there was some misunderstanding between the questions that I was asking him and what he was interpreting. So, you know, given the service license in Wisconsin, you know, it wouldn't take a whole lot from what I've researched. It's mostly on the crew member side, which they require to have the weapons and mass destruction class, which is to be done online and in a group setting. And Wisconsin actually recertifies every 3 years versus Minnesota, which is every 2. So
Not more honest than.
there's going to be some work involved, but it's not going to be like extremely labor intensive.
And as it sits now, Ryan, I believe you can respond up to 15 times per year into Wisconsin without a license.
Yeah, and when I had originally talked to him, he had said, "Oh no, there's no limit," and I think he misunderstood what because he thought that I would just talk like mutual aid, but there's incidents where we're going over there because of lack of coverage, and I think that's where my conversation with him kind of was misinterpreted. So that's where that falls into place.
Any questions for him?
Where does Medicare get their late pay?
It's a complicated formula, and I won't even pretend to know exactly what goes into it, but it's set obviously at the federal level. They done studies in 2010 and 2012 to determine the cost of an ambulance service. Our trade associations are very much opposed to the numbers that came up back then and still. So those were set as the base rates, 10 plus years ago, and we're still just building off those. There's an inflationary factor that goes in. There's a CPI, it looks at the CPI, Consumer Price Index, urban actually, instead of rural. So the good news is for 23, there is an 8.7% increase, and that's better than almost all of healthcare, just because of the uniqueness. But on the other years where general health area has, 2 or 3, we might have 1%. So that's some disparities there.
They'd like you to go back to
This one, sure. Yeah, I won't read through these, but these are just a summary of what we went through. Everything is running well. I think, I don't know what year it occurred, and no one could quite pinpoint it, but when you moved to a daytime, full-time crew members, I think that was a really good move. I think that was an important time to fill, and finding staff during the day, especially during the weekdays when everybody has normal jobs is tough. So that seems to be working quite well. The financial struggles are fairly common, as we've stated too. It's not, you're not alone there.
So Jeff, to kind of touch on your Medicare, it's not necessarily how to come up with it, but there is initiative going on right now that it's not a long, or it's not a quick fix, short term, we're going to get an increase, but over the next 3 to 4 years, like this year, by April, I returned all of our information to Medicare. And then next year, the other half of the services, returning their information. And they'll look at that information and decide, hey, all these services we're not reimbursing it enough, and then they'll look to make those recommendations. So they're actively working to try to get our reimbursement higher, but it's not as simple as saying, or next year we're going to increase it to $1,000 reimbursement rate. They're collecting the information now, and I'd say probably what,
It'll be another
4 to
20
5
Yeah,
years.
it'll be another
To
20 years.
come up with a recommendation that they are going to increase it or not.
Mileage reimbursed differently.
Different rate, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
So essentially in ambulance services, there's 4 to 5 different base rates. Let's say Medicare pays $500 for a paramedic level 911 trip. They might pay $350 for a BLS EMT level transfer, but the mileage rate for Medicare is the same whether it's a transfer or 911. It's around $8, a little more than $8 per mile now. Yeah, I just went on.
Is the work that you described the supplemental medical assistance payments program? Or is it
No, it's something different. It's through I don't know the exact name of it, but students in the Amber software to go in business, your budgets, your supply costs, your fuel costs, your number of runs, your what you bill and your pay. Like some of it will come from the billing company, some of it Tyler and I have to work together to put in, but it's kind of like an all-inclusive overall viewpoint of the ambulance service and what it's truly costing us to run that. They'll take everybody. So the more people that participate, they can see that, they're funding. Hopefully, government's recommendation to our reimbursement.
Yeah, that's the cost data collection,
Yeah.
and it's incredibly important. So you use Tyler as an example. If Tyler spends 2 hours a week working on ambulance financials, that should be recorded. We want that accounted for because we want to show the true cost of operating an ambulance service. The future reimbursement will be based on.
This is a stupid question, Dan. Transfer problem chart here. You say the average expense per transfer is $436 and some change. Why is that different than what an emergency runs costs? Because they're saying that costs $1,500 or $1,600 and using the same person on the same equipment. Just not clear on that.
That's the direct expense just related to that transfer. So on the emergency side, you would usually include in the cost of readiness. So what does that ambulance cost to be, for a whole 24 hours? Yeah, just to be ready for maybe that one call in a day. So you include all those costs typically in the 911 side. Yeah.
You break that formula down in your.
Yeah, I'm not sure I put a real true cost of readiness on there, but it would be easy enough to figure out. Yeah, but the transfers definitely are though.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Instead of using EMR, paid on call for the system. Okay.
So,
So if you're balancing those, what's easy?
so that's just our on-call wage, so like our EMI, like right now, for, running to be on call, he only gets $4 an hour, but you get $6 an hour. So when you're on-call waiting for the call, everybody's time is the same. So that's why increasing the DMRs to $4 an hour, but then when you actually go on the call, those, how much you guys get paid, you guys, I think it's 15 and they're 11.
Yeah.
Those are different. It's just the cost or increasing the standardized relatively on call.
We made that recommendation, as Ryan mentioned, just thinking that, someone's free time should be the same worth, whether they're an EMR or EMT. And you can make up that difference on the actual activation time. So that $11.15, you can play with those to make the incentives, I think would be a fair way to do it.
What are your restrictions? As far as what you can do, how difficult is being on call?
You have to be able to respond. Generally speaking, it's, you're in the city limits of Waukesha, maybe we're drinking. You can be at home, you can separate home, you can go out to eat, but it's being available and being able to respond to the station. Within
You're agreeing to be in a state of readiness.
Yeah.
So, that means
Dropping your work.
dropping whatever you're doing, go. Maybe taking a shower, not wearing shorts and flip flops, being close, so you can respond in.
And on a side note, I didn't quite mention it in here, but your volunteer labor is worth almost $200,000 a year, 160 to 200,000 per year. And your volunteers do just tremendous work and, really deserve a lot of support.
Anything else for us, Ryan?
I
We'll follow up. Obviously, this is very, very helpful and appreciate having it.
Thank you.
Just wanted to-
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a couple minutes here